Okay, so my name's Bronwen Rees, and well, I've had many decades of work in education, spiritual training, developing new ideas for business and for personal development. I write books, write articles, done many talks throughout the world. What this the Art of Living program is about is bringing together all these many years of experience to try and help not just younger people, but in finding their own way, their own ways forward, actually in preserving their minds in what is some very, very challenging times.
And what would you say that those challenging times are, and how do they affect the young people's minds?
Well, recently we've just emerged from a pandemic, which has been highly traumatic for the whole globe, of course. So there's one major trauma that still hasn't even begun to be addressed. Prior to that, there's been an epidemic, really, of mental health issues amongst younger people and older people. People who've become alienated from themselves and lost to the world in which they live. I mean, that process has been in going on for really the past, I should say, the past 40 years or so, where society has lost its way. The problem isn't, well, the problem appears in young people, but actually, the structures of society haven't supported us. So this course has been set up really just to enable and facilitate people to begin to look inside rather than outside and to find their strength and courage and wisdom from their inner depths,
Mm.
which is what has become lost as our focus is all externalized.
Now, when you say that over the last 40 years we've kind of lost ourselves as a society, could you expand on that? So, like, what was the kind of ground zero that caused this change in people's perspective?
I think what's happened is that our sort of primary our capitalist system has uh, has overgrown itself. We'll still be having we still have some form of capitalism, but it's become unsustainable. A lot of my work in the business school was looking at sustainable businesses and how they could grow themselves to support people, which is basically what they should be about.
Mm.
What they do is to support and create huge levels of inequality. So at a basic level, that's what's happened. There's a struggle that for young people, where can they find a place in this grip that the current system has got on us?
Mm. So, what would you say to young people who don't really know what they want to do with their lives at the moment and who are feeling trapped by that system?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say preserve your mind. And part of my work has been I introduced mindfulness into businesses and schools many, many years ago. These are strong and potent techniques for maintaining an inner control, so that the messages that come through social media, which of course has had an impact, doesn't take a hold. I mean, if you imagine today, we are bombarded with advertising, with narratives of fear, all of which are creating such a terrific dis-ease
Mm.
amongst everyone. So, in the sense of taking hold of the mind, then there are very old technologies that can help work with consciousness.
Mm.
I mean, at another level, we're at a stage of a extraordinary evolution of consciousness.
Mm. It
And
sounds like you're saying that we're focusing a lot more on the external than the internal,
absolutely, yes.
rather than like we're focusing more on material possessions rather than looking at our own
Exactly,
spiritual energy and like where we want to go and where we want to put that energy and how we want to
exactly,
spend our lives.
exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We haven't left any value for young people, and
Yeah,
I'm aware of somebody of my generation. Hate to say it, but coming up for 70, that I'm probably one of the very few who actually know what it's like not to have social media around, or
yeah,
not to have television, not to have advertising.
yeah.
So, when I was young, you would be out in nature and it would be quite natural to be playing, and this just isn't available.
And it's bizarre that it sounds so alien nowadays. I had no
Absolutely.
TV and I was outside
Yeah,
playing with my friends, and it sounds like, what
I
are you
know.
doing? Why are you
I
doing
know. It's shocking, and it's a conditioned behavior.
that? Yeah.
So, actually, what this course does is to break through and to begin to look at what conditioned behavior is
Mm.
and provide pathways for freedom.
But it's like you said, I think, especially with COVID, I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that they are just living a 9 to 5 and spending
Yeah,
that money and then working
yeah,
for corporations that don't really have much interest in them, and that they're putting their time into somebody that realistically isn't going to go anywhere when they could be
that,
making changes.
that's right. Yes, it's and the change is there. I mean, we are eminently adaptable and flexible as human beings and human spirits, but that's been crushed. So that's the challenge and the impetus of our times.
Mm.
Um,
What do you think needs to be done? Like I said, so that a lot, obviously, people are now kind of waking up to the fact that they
mm,
aren't living how they want to live, and they
mm.
feel like they're kind of trapped in a system where they don't have much choice. What do you think needs to be done to push this way of thinking to those people? I feel like a lot of them have it in their minds that they want to make this change, but it's also that they're maybe too scared to actually go for it. So how do
Absolutely.
you think we can push it to them to actually give them the inspiration?
Well, I think actually that there are groups of people that have been working in this sort of area over the last several decades,
Hmm.
creating small groups of people who learn to work together. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, and but it's also the greatest opportunity actually, is for us to learn how to come back into right relationship with each other.
Hmm.
If we're in right relationship with ourselves, then that becomes possible for us to do that. And it is quite amazing what I'm my on my work. I'm also a psychotherapist and have been for 20 years.
Yeah.
But my work has expanded much more into group work
Hmm.
because this is where the impetus can come from, and where we can support each other across the generations, I have to say. Hopefully that, because we each have a unique perspective. Um, but 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 real emergence will come from these groups, and it's already coming. People are learning to exchange without going through necessarily the normal economic channels. It's an energy that comes from within,
Hmm.
actually. And that can come from, it has to come in the end from a sort of, from mutual support, but having the courage to reveal that we're struggling is the first step, actually.
How do you think we've let it get this far? Because, like I was saying, it feels like nowadays people are starting to wake up to the idea that we've let it get to a certain extent. But how do you think we've actually managed to sort of it's slipped under the radar for this long, and it's kind of
Yeah.
now everyone's kind of realizing like what kind of world are we living in, where there's a massive LED ball in the middle of California that just pings advertisements at millions of people every day.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's beyond belief, really, from what
Yeah,
I've known. Not being prepared to wake up, actually. There's a sort of denial. There's been a denial of what's happening. And it's a question of timing.
yeah,
I thought years ago, when I sort of introduced mindfulness into businesses, that change could come in that particular way. Actually, that can become appropriated. But also, I've also felt that the corporations will sort of destabilize themselves in the end. There's always a natural time for things, and
yeah.
so whilst it's difficult, it's also hugely, there's huge opportunities for people now.
Hmm.
because there's a willingness, and as you say, I mean, I'm pleased to hear you say that coming from your generation. Well, yes, we don't want to live like this. This
No, yeah,
isn't.
definitely. I mean, among my generation, I've spoken to like loads of people who
Yeah,
have realised that they're going to finish school and then that's it for the rest of their life. They're just going to be working and working until they die. And especially now with like the government raising retirement ages and things like that, people
yes,
are realising that what am I getting myself into now?
yes, yeah. Well, there are alternatives arising. There's alternative educational systems, and but I think some of the change will come from within eventually, because I think even people within those are realizing that it can't last. But every person has to find their own way. I mean, that's also one of the characteristics, I would say, of this age,
Hmm.
is that the last 400 years or so, there's been a whole trajectory of more and more what I would call individualization of the ego, so that we actually have more capacity in the thinking realm than as a species, actually. So actually, we also have the opportunity to start using that.
But also, I feel like it takes a certain level of awareness, self-awareness to
Absolutely.
get
Uh,
there.
yeah, it
And
does. It does. It does. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
would you, because I feel like also a lot of people kind of, like you said, are in denial. They don't want to like
Mm.
leave this safety box that the government has built for them. How would you advise people to allow themselves to become more self-aware? Because I think a lot of it stems from fear as well. People are scared of the unknown and they're scared of saying, "Well, I don't want to live like this and spend my life making money and doing
Yeah.
this. I would rather go and help whales or go and help animals." But then they're like, "Oh, well, I won't have any money doing that. So how can I do it?"
Yeah. Well, I think becoming self-aware is the key, because from that base emerges a certain connection with the self that actually shows the way forward. And now that might sound a bit abstract, but actually in this moment, there are a lot of opportunities. What becoming self-aware, and I suppose this goes back to the Art of Living program, it is a whole program of how to get to know yourself, and
Mm,
that is being self-aware, and that's working with the self in a very different way. It doesn't. I'm not saying this is easy, because, but it is a choice. You can make a choice to get to know yourself and get to develop your inner faculties
mm,
more, in a way that hasn't been done before. By learning to look inside and be able, and also to reflect on what's happening on the outside world. So you get a constant reflection and co-reflection of life. It becomes much more conscious.
yeah,
So you become much more conscious of where you are creating old patterns and old conditionings, and not acting out of your own sense of destiny, but out of a conditioned one. But one does need support in that.
yeah.
2,500 years ago, people would be able to do it by sitting on a cushion and meditating. But again, this work has to be done at depth, supporting one another, and we can mirror each other in our flaws and blind spots,
Mm,
and recognize that each other does have flaws and blind spots. That's
mm.
part of the
Yeah, exactly.
part of the denial. This is what Jung would call the shadow. We can get to know the shadow, and get to know that there's a far more innate wisdom within the world that they did know millennia ago, that's got completely lost.
Yeah. And also that so that the shadow is like it takes a lot of acceptance to go, yeah, there are negative parts of me that I don't like
Yes,
and that I'm not that I'm going to get work to get rid of them, but that they exist and that they are present and
yeah,
that they are a part of me. And
yes,
it
that's
doesn't have
right.
to be that you're working to get rid of it. It's just working
Yeah.
to make sure that you're aware and to not let it influence your actions.
Well, actually, what one does, and that's what this program works with, is provided is a holding where one can sit with these difficult parts, actually sit in what I would call the field, and that's being held in a very safe environment, And actually, as you sit with it, you can feel it, and then there's an acceptance, and something happens, something gets transformed actually within the body itself, and it changes. So it's not pushed away, but it becomes integrated.
Mm. Because I've had psychotherapy before, and I've found that it's when you go into those really deep meditative states that you kind of it's not kind of a dissolvent of the ego, but it's kind of the
Mm,
ego fades away, and you kind of take a back seat and can observe everything
that's right.
objectively and see it all and go, well, maybe that
That's
doesn't
right.
matter anymore. Maybe I should let go of that grudge I've been holding for so long
Yes, that's
and allow
right.
yourself to separate from your own
Yeah,
ego and
yeah.
also to acknowledge that there's different parts of your ego and
Mm,
they control and manipulate different things
mm,
and
mm.
all have different desires.
Yes, that's
And it's
right.
kind of like bringing those all together to find that art of living, I suppose.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, actually, I call it the art of being human as well. And
Mm,
there's more to us than our rational mind knows. That's what's really exciting about this work. And I have to say, from my work with young people, I just find it extraordinary because you bring different minds as well.
mm,
That's changed in the last 30 years or so. So there's a whole real relational exchange, and something very new begins to emerge. And I'm really excited by being able to do that in groups of people. And I've
yeah.
seen it in the first 2 weekends we've done of the 6 months training, and it's extraordinary, and it's very, very moving and exciting as to what people can bring. And
Mm,
I think that that energy has got suppressed and lost, and it's bringing new and innovative thinking and
yeah.
being. So that's there's I was going to say infinite hope, but that's not quite the right word. But well, there's infinite possibilities. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And it does require, as you recognise, um, courage and willingness to want to do it.
Mm. I think it's also that there's infinite hope, but there's also the complete opposite. There's infinite rejection. It's taking into account that you've got both, and it's what you want to do, what you choose to do. If you choose to
That's
have
right.
infinite hope, you'll go far.
Yes, 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 that's right.
Could you talk to us a bit more about some of the group work you've been doing, and sort of how the process of that goes, and how different people open up in those sessions?
Yeah, I've got an article written in a journal called Parry Perspectives, actually, and it talks about what I call embodied field inquiry.
Hmm.
And we would start, for example, with a sitting in a meditational space, which is part of the training that I've been trained as a Buddhist for many, many years. So we sort of I invite in to help people slow down and really begin with themselves, and then or to feel into the bodily sensations. And then I would introduce occasionally the what I would call the ancestral field. So every person is bringing their conditioned self. So we begin to sort of make connections deep in the past. And then I would also evoke something called the spiritual practitioners who've worked over the many, many centuries. So it becomes what I would call a field energy that can be really support the work that's being done. And then we might work individually, and then we might begin to cast our eye over the events of our lives, and begin to make sense of some of the patterns that work within it. It's largely experiential throughout, but there is a lot of notes, books to accompany it, or the second weekend, for example, we look a lot at intergenerational trauma and how we can sit with it and work with it.
Hmm. Would you say that it's kind of like a group therapy session? I feel like that kind of diminishes it a bit, but or more of like a group meditative experience where you're kind of not opening up as much, but more deep delving into yourself personally, but in a setting where you're with people.
That's right, and then one can deepen down into it, and then share the experiences
Mm.
afterwards,
Yeah.
which not only can give insight into oneself, but it can also open up um, as a sort of research project, actually, because one can see what consciousness is able to do in those levels.
Mm.
So there is very much a sort of I'd say research scientific side to it as well,
Mm.
or the possibilities for that, because some people are more interested in that than um, or to be able to map it. So there's a lot of reflection and co-reflection throughout. For example, we work. There's a set of practices, I would say, about six of them. I haven't got them in front of me now, but one of which is the polymath Rudolf Steiner's approach to what's called a daily review or a life review, where you go backwards over the day, and as you go backwards over the day, visualizing yourself going backwards, your consciousness actually can literally change, which will
Mm.
give you insights into different levels of time and space. Actually, they're very profound.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say with my experience with psychotherapy, it's almost like a really powerful kind of psychedelic experience. It's like
Mm,
with my therapist, she did a certain exercise where it was like bringing up past memories that cause
mm,
trauma, and then just I don't know.
mm.
I would say like realizing that I'm putting way more emotional weight onto it than needs to be,
Yes,
and that it doesn't really matter, and I'm holding on to things that don't really matter, and
that's
then
right.
kind of visualizing myself pushing them to the back of my mind. They get smaller and smaller and quieter until they're just not there anymore. And
That's
it
right.
sounds like
That's right.
magic, but it's scarily real. Like it does work.
Yes, that's right. Well, it is real, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
change happens.
One
And
more question. Oh, sorry.
you've witnessed the change. So
Yeah.
that's the important thing, because we don't bear witness to our actions these days either. And
Mm.
that's something that we've lost.
And that's also
Storytelling. Yeah,
with regards to staying conscious. You need to be conscious of kind of everything,
you do.
but also let it pass by as well and not hold on to it
That's right.
and
Yes.
just observe. But my final question is, does the art of living follow a certain philosophy, or would you say it's more of a broader ideology that, say, if you're religious, you could also kind of follow the art of living whilst accompanying a religion?
Yeah, it's not a religion, it's a set of practices
Yeah.
um, that I would say you could call it evolutionary or contemplative inquiry, if you like.
Hmm.
So you bring with it your own belief structure, if that's how your mind is, and just open to see what happens.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not an ideology. It is a set of there is a discipline to it, actually, and there is a method in it, which I call memory, mirrors, and metamorphosis. So anybody can try it.
Hmm.
It's a question of trying it and seeing it, and if it works, then I'd like to think you will have attained something very valuable. And also, another important feature, for me, is that it builds up already has done a community of practitioners
Hmm.
who can support one another over time in doing the practices, because one does need support in overcoming our own resistance to change.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing I hadn't mentioned that's part of it is the I Ching, which is the very old Chinese Bible. So that gives us sort of most. I could say that one of the models that the Art of Living program emulates is the old mystery school.
And does
So
that contain more of the practices rather than beliefs?
their practices.
Yeah, so it's more the
Yeah,
meditating practices and
that's right.
yeah.
It's looking into other realms, if you like, or being open to that, but being fully grounded in this reality and integrated with the findings of modern science.
Another question quickly. Do you think there's a reason that it's mostly, no, well, at least in the modern day, it's mostly Eastern culture that we're drawing on for these kind of practices? Say if that's Buddhism or like ancient Chinese meditation, things like that. Is there a reason for that, or have we like lost Westernized culture, or is that something that was in the West and we've kind of over time just destroyed it?
No, actually the art of living itself is not just Eastern practices. They are there, but I'm saying I've worked with all of them at depth, including
Mm,
the Western esoteric practices. So as I say, I work quite a lot with Steiner's work,
mm,
um, and so they have to evolve and they have to change, but we have to understand these other practices at depth within our own Western psyche.
mm,
Well, I was drawn to Buddhism and indeed was ordained with what used to be the Western Buddhist order, but realized that my Western psyche needed more.
mm,
So that's why I'm would draw on uh, Greek and Romans and all the philosophy of the last 2 millennia.
mm. But I suppose it's also not necessarily one set belief. It's kind of
Yeah,
open to your own interpretation and what
exactly,
motivates you.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, and that's part of the evolution that's
Yeah,
happening at the moment. It is that one has to find that path, but one also it's it's helpful to have. It's necessary to have guides in a way that can point you in that
yeah.
direction. And the art of living is about developing people, for me anyway, who can become those guides.
So thank you for your time. You've been
Okay.
absolutely wonderful. Is there anything you want to link or give anyone who's watching any attention to?
Well, if they want to look at my webpage, newbornseer.co.uk, and incubatio.co.uk. There's articles, but the Newborn Seer begins to talk more about the the work that I'm doing. It hasn't got the art of living on there, but there'll be a lot of the ideas I've been talking about today.